Hi everybody, in this video I'm going to be talking about the aerobic power field assessments that you'll be doing in lab this week. So why are we doing this? Right now in lecture we are covering the aerobic energy systems, and as you know, these are the systems that help us sustain exercise that's a little bit lower in intensity, but we can sustain for longer periods of time. In our aerobic energy systems, we can use either carbohydrates in the form of glycogen or blood glucose and fat through the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain to make ATP. So all of the processes that we've been covering in lecture are what is occurring when we do this type of exercise. When you see the word aerobic, you should know that it means oxygen. And when I say this, I don't necessarily mean that anaerobic means absolutely no oxygen and aerobic means lots of oxygen. What I mean is that the consumption and how much we need is equal with aerobic activities. So our supply and our demand are equal, and therefore we're able to use our aerobic energy systems to get energy. Another reason why I chose to do these tests in lab this week is that they're field tests. And you can easily do these field tests at home, either yourself or using your friends and family. Before diving into these tests, you need to know the difference between a maximal and a submaximal test. With a maximal test, you're going to go to your full capacity. So you'll go to your full 100%, feeling like you can't go any harder. This is going to give you a true max value, hopefully. With submaximal tests, you're only going to get up to about 70 to 70% of your max and then estimate what your max would be using the results. So some examples of variables that you would use to determine results include heart rate, distance, and time. So why do we use maximal tests? Like I was saying in the last slide, maximal tests are generally more accurate. Because the goal is to determine a VO2 max, why not actually get to your max or your 100%? Unfortunately, you're not able to always use maximal tests. When you are working with individuals such as the elderly or sedentary or obese individuals, this may not be the best test to use. If you're working with these special populations, you would probably be better off doing a submaximal test. That way you can still estimate what their 100% would be, but you don't necessarily need to get them there. If you think about your grandma or somebody that you know that doesn't exercise at all, if you brought them to the gym right now, would you put them on the treadmill and tell them to run as fast as they can? No, hopefully not. But knowing max values are still very valuable. So doing these submaximal tests to estimate your VO2 max is a really good tool for professionals working with these clinical populations. The advantages of field tests include that they don't require any specialized equipment. Even though lab tests are more accurate, these tests are often very expensive, and you need to have special training in order to use the equipment to do the max tests, or to do the lab tests rather. I am hoping that at some point before you graduate, you'll have the opportunity to do a true VO2 max test using laboratory equipment, but until then, a field test will still give you very good values. Another good advantage of a field test is that you can usually test multiple people at once. And if you remember from high school PE, your teachers probably did that. Everybody at the same time ran the mile or did the beep test. Whereas with a lab test, you can't do that unless you have an unlimited budget and lots of equipment. Some disadvantages of field tests include that they're usually not as accurate because for example, for this test, we're not actually able to measure gas exchange. We're just estimating it using heart rate and time. And also we're using estimations. As you're going to see in this lab, you're going to use a series of calculations to estimate the VO2 max. The first test you're going to do is the Cooper 1.5 run walk test. You're going to just find a 1 mile course. This doesn't have to be a perfect mapped out course. It could be around your neighborhood or around the campus lake or something like that. You can use your Apple Watch or your Fitbit to measure out 1.5 miles. If you don't have a smartwatch, another good app to use is mapmyrun.com. You're going to run or walk the course and then record your time. This is going to be considered a maximal test because you're supposed to go all out. And also for most people, especially people that don't run, running anything more than probably a half mile would be considered a max. This is really good for athletes and for aerobically active people. A fun fact is that this is the test that's used in the military physical fitness exam. Whereas it's great for active people, it's probably not the best for the majority of the population who can't run 1.5 miles. With that being said, I do want everybody in this class to attempt the test. I don't care what your time is. If you need to walk most of it, that's fine. If you feel like you absolutely cannot do the test due to injuries or medical reasons, you can have a family member or a friend do it for you and record their results. The second test you'll be doing is the Rockport Walk test. For this test, you're going to measure out 1 mile. Ideally, this should be on a track because the track is flat, but if you don't have access to the track, any course will be fine. The person's going to walk a mile and then you'll record the time. This is considered a sub-maximal test because you're walking. Although, depending on the population you're working with, for some this could be a maximal test, but it's not meant to be. This is really good for pretty much anybody, but especially sedentary, obese, and elderly because it's not that intense. I probably would not use this test on an athlete or somebody that does a lot of aerobic exercise just because it's too easy and you probably wouldn't get the best results because of that. And then the third test you'll do is the Cooper 12-minute walk-run test. For this, you're just going to walk or run for 12 minutes and record the distance. So again, you can use a Fitbit, Apple Watch, or use a website to get that distance. Anyone can really do this test unless they can't exercise for 12 minutes because you can stop to take breaks whenever needed. Even if you are sedentary and don't do a lot of running, you can still complete this test by walking most of it. You are supposed to go all out, so this is considered a maximal test. For this week, I do want you to try all 3 tests, whether you're recording your own results or you're getting results from a family member or a friend. If you don't do a lot of aerobic exercise, I do suggest that you do these tests on different days, so you should plan out this week accordingly. For our calculations, we're going to be using time, distance, and or heart rate to estimate the VO2 max. In your book, specifically on the data sheets, you'll see some calculations. My biggest suggestion with these calculations is to pay attention on what the unit of measurement is when you put in the variables, and also to use order of operations. And then lastly, what you're actually going to be calculating and comparing to the norms is the VO2 max. And like I was saying earlier, VO2 max is a measurement of someone's aerobic ability or how well they can use oxygen. So the higher your number is, the more aerobically fit you are. We're going to be talking in a lot more detail about VO2 max in lecture, but for now, just know that a higher number is good. Typically for college students, the average is around 30, maybe 38 to 45 as your VO2 max. If you don't get those numbers, that's fine, but just to give you perspective of around what the numbers should be. Since these tests are pretty simple, I don't really feel the need to video record myself doing it, although I have done all of these tests multiple times. If you have any questions on the procedures of the tests or how to do the calculations, just reach out and let me know.